The door slammed shut with a sound so loud it felt final, like the end of the world. Thick steel met thick steel, and the echo rolled through the concrete hallway. Inside the small cell, a man stood still, his hands shaking just slightly. This was Ramzi Youssef, the mastermind behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. The man who once dreamed of tearing down towers now lived in silence, locked inside one of the most secure prisons in the United States. No crowds, no followers, no escape. Just walls, guards, and time that would never end. Youssef had tried to kill thousands. The bomb he built exploded beneath the World Trade Center, ripping through the parking garage and sending smoke, fire, and fear racing upward. 6 people were dead, more than 1,000 were injured. New York froze in shock. But now, years later, the man responsible was sealed away from the world. And he was not alone. Across the country, other terrorists sat in similar cells. Men like Ahmed Rassam, the Millennium Bomber, who tried to bring death to Los Angeles during a New Year's celebration. All of them were alive, all of them were captured, and all of them were being held by the same system they once swore to destroy. But even locked behind steel and concrete, one question haunted U.S. officials. What if prison was not the end of the threat? What if the danger did not stop when the cell door closed? That fear takes us back to the beginning. In the early 1990s, the United States believed large terrorist attacks on its soil were unlikely. The Cold War was over. America felt safe. That feeling shattered on February 26, 1993. A massive explosion rocked the World Trade Center in New York City. Smoke filled stairwells. People ran in panic. Power went out. Many believed the towers would fall. They did not fall that day, but the message was clear. America was now a target. At the center of the plot was Ramzi Youssef. He was calm, intelligent, and deeply committed to violent extremism. He believed mass murder was a tool, not a crime. After the bombing, Youssef fled the country thinking he had won, but the hunt for him became global. U.S. agents tracked him across borders, following clues piece by piece. In 1995, he was captured in Pakistan after a joint operation. He did not resist, he did not speak, he simply stared. When Youssef arrived in the United States, the government faced a serious decision. Where do you put a man who wants to kill thousands, even from behind bars? The answer was isolation, extreme control, no chance to influence others. He was eventually sent to a high-security federal prison where every letter, every word, and every movement was monitored. Years later, another man would test that system. Ahmed Rassam entered the U.S. from Canada in 1999, carrying explosives meant for Los Angeles International Airport. His plan was simple and horrifying. Detonate a bomb during New Year's celebrations and kill as many people as possible. But Rassam made mistakes. A nervous customs officer noticed something was wrong. Rassam ran. He was caught. Like Youssef, Rassam was sentenced to decades in prison. Like Youssef, he was cut off from the general population. The U.S. government had learned a lesson. Terrorists could not be treated like ordinary inmates. They could not be allowed to recruit, plan, or inspire. Prison was no longer just punishment. It was prevention. Inside these facilities, life is stripped down to nothing. Small cells, limited contact, lights that never fully go dark, guards trained to watch every move. Terror inmates are often housed in special units designed to stop communication with the outside world. Some are kept alone for years, not as revenge, but as protection for everyone else. Still, the threat never fully disappears. Authorities know that ideas can be as dangerous as weapons. A single message, a single follower could lead to violence beyond prison walls. That is why these inmates are watched more closely than almost anyone else in America. And yet, even with all these controls, something troubling began to surface. Reports emerged of extremists trying to influence others from inside prison. Quiet conversations, hidden notes, carefully chosen words. It raised a terrifying thought. What if the most dangerous battlefield was not outside the prison walls, but inside them? The lights never fully turned off. Even in the middle of the night, a dull glow leaked into the cell, making sleep shallow and restless. Inside this place, darkness was controlled, just like everything else. For the men locked here, there was no forgetting where they were, and for the people watching them, there was no room for mistakes. Deep inside America's most secure federal prisons, officials began to realize something unsettling. Locking terrorists away didn't always end their power. It only changed how that power moved. Ramzi Youssef was not allowed to mix freely with other prisoners. His calls were recorded, his mail was read, his visits were rare and closely watched. Every rule was meant to keep him silent. But even silence can speak. Intelligence officers feared that a single sentence shared at the right time could inspire someone else to act. That fear reshaped how the U.S. prison system handled terror inmates.
By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the government created special housing units for convicted terrorists. These units were built to limit contact, slow communication, and break any chance of forming networks. Inmates spent most of their day alone. Meals were slid through slots. Exercise happened in small cages. Conversations were short and monitored. The goal was simple: control the message before it escaped. Ahmed Ressam learned this reality quickly. After his arrest, he cooperated with investigators at first, giving details about terror training camps and extremist contacts. But once sentenced, he became another high-risk inmate. His movements were tracked. Guards watched for signs of influence. Officials worried about how younger or weaker prisoners might see him. To some, he could look like a hero. To others, a teacher. That was the danger. Prison is a place filled with anger, fear, and lost identity. Extremist ideas can grow in those conditions. U.S. authorities knew this. That is why terror inmates were often separated, not just for security, but to stop recruitment. The concern was never just about attacks planned inside prison. It was about attacks planned for the future, by people who would one day walk free. As years passed, the list of terror inmates in U.S. custody grew. Men connected to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Men linked to later plots. Some foreign, some American. All considered highly dangerous. Many were sent to the strictest prisons in the country, including Supermax facilities designed to hold the worst of the worst. These prisons were not built for comfort. They were built to break routines, limit influence, and remove opportunity. Cells were skull. Human contact was minimal. Guards rotated often so no bonds formed. Every system was designed around one idea: terror must not spread. But no system is perfect. Officials began to notice warning signs, extremist symbols drawn on paper, conversations that stopped when guards approached, prisoners asking strange questions about global events. Each sign alone meant little. Together, they painted a troubling picture. Even under extreme control, ideas were still moving. This forced a hard question: how do you stop belief? The U.S. government responded by increasing intelligence inside prisons. Special teams monitored terror inmates full-time. Analysts reviewed patterns, not just actions. A prisoner who exercised too much. One who suddenly became quiet. One who tried to mentor others. Nothing was ignored. At the same time, officials had to balance security with law. These inmates were criminals, but they still had rights. Religious practice, legal counsel, and basic human treatment had to be respected. Too much pressure could turn them into symbols. Too little could turn them into leaders. It was a constant battle. Outside the prison walls, the public rarely thought about these men anymore. Years had passed since the World Trade Center bombing. New tragedies had taken the spotlight. But inside the system, the threat was never forgotten. Each terror inmate represented unfinished business, a reminder that one person with the right ideas could change history. Then came a new fear. Intelligence reports suggested that some extremists believed prison was not the end, but a phase, a test, a place to wait. They saw themselves as soldiers behind enemy lines, surviving until the next chance. This mindset worried officials more than any weapon ever could. Because weapons can be taken away, ideas cannot. As technology advanced, monitoring became more complex. Even simple communication could carry hidden meaning, a phrase, a number, a reference. Guards were trained to look deeper, to question what sounded normal. Every detail mattered. And yet, despite all this effort, one truth remained. As long as terror inmates lived, the risk lived with them. Near the end of a long shift, one guard once said quietly, "The door closes, but the story doesn't end." That sentence captured the reality of U.S. custody for terrorists. These men were contained, but never ignored, watched, but never trusted, alive, but cut off from the world they tried to destroy. As years turned into decades, the question grew heavier. Would these measures be enough forever? Or would one mistake, one missed signal be all it took to turn a prison cell into the starting point of another tragedy? The answer was still unknown. And just as officials believed they had learned everything about control and terror behind bars, a new generation of extremism began to rise, bringing with it a threat even harder to predict and even harder to stop. The warning came quietly, buried inside reports and routine briefings, but its meaning was terrifying. The threat had changed. Terror was no longer coming only from men trained overseas or tied to famous attacks. It was now growing closer to home, shaped by prison time, fueled by isolation, and hardened by years behind bars.
Inside U.S. prisons, officials began to see a pattern. Some inmates entered custody angry but unfocused. They left prison disciplined, committed, and deeply radicalized. Not all terrorists came in fully formed. Some were shaped by what they saw and heard while locked away. That truth forced America to confront a painful reality. Prisons were not just holding places. In rare but dangerous cases, they were turning points. Ramzi Youssef remained locked down, aging behind steel doors, his body trapped even as his beliefs stayed frozen in time. He was never released, never forgiven, but his legacy lived on in how the system treated others like him. Every rule, every restriction, every silent hallway was shaped by the fear of another Youssef, another Rassam, another name not yet known. After the attacks of September 11, 2001, everything changed. Terrorism was no longer a warning, it was a wound, and the U.S. prison system became one of the last lines of defense. New terror convictions filled federal courts. New inmates arrived under armed escort. Some shouted, some stayed silent, all were watched. The government expanded special housing units and strengthened communication controls. Terror inmates were often kept far from population centers. Letters were delayed or blocked. Phone calls were limited to minutes. Guards were trained not just to watch behavior, but to listen for meaning. A pause, a phrase, a shift in tone. Yet the deeper problem remained: time. Prison gives people time to think, time to replay beliefs, time to justify violence. For extremists, time can sharpen resolve instead of softening it. Officials feared that some inmates saw themselves as examples, martyrs who survived, proof that the cause lived on. To fight this, intelligence teams worked quietly, day after day. They shared information across agencies. They tracked movements, changes, and contacts. A terror inmate transferred from one facility to another could trigger new alerts. Nothing was casual. Nothing was routine. Ahmed Rassam's case haunted many officials. He had been stopped by chance. A single officer doing his job noticed something wrong. One small decision prevented a mass killing.
That same idea guided prison work. One missed detail could undo years of effort. Outside the prison walls, the public saw calm. Inside, there was constant pressure. Guards knew that even boredom could be dangerous, that even silence could hide planning. Terrorism does not always shout. Sometimes it waits. As the years passed, some inmates aged out of violence, others did not. Some showed regret, others showed pride. The system had to treat each case differently without ever letting its guard down. This balance was exhausting, but necessary. Then came a new challenge: lone actor extremists, people with no direct group ties, no clear leaders, no obvious network. These individuals were harder to track, harder to predict, and sometimes harder to separate inside prison. Their ideas spread quietly, often disguised as anger or grievance rather than ideology. This forced another shift. Prison staff received more training. Mental health professionals became part of security planning. Officials learned that understanding belief was as important as controlling behavior. Still, no system could promise zero risk. Every terror inmate in U.S. custody represents a choice made years ago, a path taken, a moment when violence was chosen over life. The prison door closes on that choice, but it does not erase it. The responsibility to contain it lasts forever. Today, many of the most dangerous terrorists in American history remain locked away, aging in silence. Their names are no longer headlines, their faces no longer shown, but their presence continues to shape policy, security, and fear. Because the truth is simple and unsettling. Terror does not end when a sentence is handed down. It only changes form. And as long as these men live behind bars, watched but never forgotten, the question remains unanswered. Is the system strong enough to hold not just bodies, but beliefs? That question hangs in the air, heavy and unresolved, as the prison doors stay shut and the next generation of threats begins to take shape beyond the walls. The final truth is the hardest one to face. Even when the prison doors are locked, even when the cells are sealed, the danger is never fully gone. It is only contained. Inside America's highest security prisons, some of the most dangerous terrorists in American history wake up every day to the same routine. Steel doors, concrete walls, silent hallways, guards watching from behind thick glass. Men like Ramzi Youssef will never walk free again. Men like Ahmed Rassam will never stand in a courtroom as free citizens. Their bodies are controlled, their movements are limited, but the system knows one thing very clearly: control does not mean victory. For decades now, the United States has chosen a clear path. Terrorists are not hidden overseas. They are not disappeared. They are captured, tried in court, and locked away inside the justice system. This choice sends a message. Even those who try to destroy the country will face its laws. Not revenge, not chaos, law.
But that choice comes with a cost. Every day, prison staff must stay alert. Every word spoken by a terror inmate matters. Every change in behavior is recorded. A smile, a silence, a sudden interest in world events. Nothing is too small, because history has shown that terror often begins quietly. Over time, the system is improved. Better monitoring, better training, better coordination between prisons and intelligence agencies. Terror inmates are kept apart. Communication is limited. Recruitment is watched closely. These measures have worked. No major terror attack in the United States has ever been planned successfully from inside a federal prison. That matters. It means the system is holding, for now. Still, officials know they are not fighting just people. They are fighting ideas. Ideas that survive prison walls. Ideas that do not age, even when the men holding them do. This is why some terror inmates are kept under the strictest conditions for life, not because of what they did, but because of what they could still inspire. As the years pass, these inmates grow older. Hair turns gray, voices grow quieter. Some lose hope, some never do. A few express regret, others remain convinced they were right. Prison cannot force belief to change, it can only stop belief from spreading. Outside the prisons, the world keeps moving. New threats rise, new names appear in the news. Younger extremists replace older ones. Many of them study the past. They read about the World Trade Center bombing. They learn about failed plots. They learn about prison sentences. And still, some choose the same path. That is why these stories matter. The men locked away today are reminders of how close America came to disaster, reminders of how fragile safety can be, reminders that one truck, one bag, one decision can change history. The U.S. prison system stands as a final barrier, not perfect, not invisible, but standing. Guards walk those halls every day knowing the stakes. Intelligence officers review reports knowing that boredom can be deadly. Judges hand down sentences knowing they are not just punishing the past, but protecting the future. In the end, terror inmates in U.S. custody are frozen moments in time. They represent plans that failed, attacks that were stopped, lives that were saved. And even though their names fade from headlines, their presence continues to shape how America defends itself. The steel doors will stay closed, the lights will stay on, the silence will remain heavy. But the story is not over. Because as long as hatred exists, as long as violence finds believers, the fight does not end at the prison gate, it only shifts. And that is why telling these stories matters. If you want to keep uncovering what happens behind the walls, how real crimes shape real systems, and how close the world has come to disaster more times than we realize, make sure you stay with us. Follow, subscribe, and keep watching, because the next story may be one the world almost forgot, but should never ignore.